If you're looking for ancient mysteries, you've come to the right place. We dabble in the distance, observe the old, and learn about the long forgotten on this channel. We love nothing more than a mysterious archaeological discovery. Fortunately for you, and for us, there are plenty of them to tell you about. So let's get started. Our first discovery takes us to the United Kingdom, where archaeologists believe they've uncovered new information about the way their ancient ancestors buried their relatives and loved ones 6,000 years ago. A recently published study claims that the ancient breeds used extremely rare rock crystals to mark important burial sites. These perfectly transparent pieces of quartz formed into huge hexagonal gems were often transported hundreds of miles to their destination so that they can become a part of a burial site. That suggests that the act of leaving the crystals was hugely significant, as does the fact that they were deliberately and carefully broken up into smaller chunks once they arrived at the site. Evidence of these claims comes from a site at the door of Stone Hill in the county of Hertfordshire, where archaeologists found a complex of ancient timber halls and burial mounds dating back to the early Neolithic period. This was around the time that the British began to practice farming. The only significant natural sources of rock crystals like this and the British Isles are in Wales. So the people performing these burials must have known about the natural resources of Wales 6,000 years ago, despite living many miles away. If there was an enormous megalithic complex containing more than 500 standing stones somewhere near you, you'd like to think somebody might have noticed it by now. Incredibly, a megalithic complex matching that description went totally unnoticed in the south of Spain until August 2022. Despite the fact that it's standing in the open, now it's finally been spotted. Archaeologists think it might be one of the largest sites of its kind in all of Europe. The stones were found in a field in Twelve, a province that is close to the southernmost point of the border between Spain and Portugal. They were only spotted because the land had been earmarked for an avocado plantation. So a survey was carried out before development work began. Now it's an area of archaeological interest. The site's been named La Torre Li Gennaro. Early indications are that the stones have been in situ for around 2,600 years. They include dolmens, mounds, standing stones, and cists. The site was obviously of enormous significance to the ancient inhabitants of the region. But as with all such sites, we have no idea why. As it turns out, there might be dozens of ancient stone mega-monuments in Europe that have managed to sneak under the radar until now. Here's one from Lauder, which is a well-known ancient burial mound in Cyprus. It turns out that the ancient burial mound has been partially hiding an even older one for all this time. The tumulus of Lona has been hiding an enormous monument, including a rampart and staircase. The creation of a monument of this size would have necessitated the mobilization of a massive workforce and expert engineers, which is no small ask considering that the work was done during the SYPRO classical period of 2,400 years ago. The rampart is a defensive monument 500 feet long, with an internal area of over 5,200 square feet. No one knows who built Leona, which means nobody knows who built this newly discovered mega-structure either. The big question is whether the older building was ever finished. Based on the fact that the rest of it is missing and the tumulus was built directly on top of it, it's likely that it was abandoned in a state of partial construction. Maybe it was just too big a project to pull off. The idea is that there's an enormous prehistoric tunnel network running beneath most of Europe. Sounds too preposterous to be true. And yet there's plenty of evidence to suggest that it exists. Evidence of tunnels has been found beneath several 100 Neolithic-era settlements on the continent. And many experts believe that all of the tunnels were once linked. If they were right, the network would have run all the way from Scotland to Turkey. That's an unbelievable undertaking and a colossal amount of work for people who would have had to dig them out with hand tools 12,000 years ago. Evidence for the existence of the tunnels has been presented by the German archaeologist Dr. Heinrich Kusch in his book Secrets of the Underground Door to an Ancient World. Bizarrely, most of the tunnels are just 30 inches wide, barely enough for a slim individual to crawl through on their belly, and places they expand into storage chambers, nukes, and even whole rooms with stone seating. The purpose of the tunnels is unknown. Are they just a safe way to travel around and avoid predators or wars going on overhead? If so, why are they so narrow? Did aliens visit Valley Day in Kanto and Chile thousands of years ago? Probably not. But the petroglyphs in the area do make us wonder if the name of the location translates into English as the Enchanted Valley. And looking at these images, it's not hard to see why the petroglyphs and pictographs are widely seen as the work of the Elmo culture. If so, they're at least 2,300 years old. However, there are some who believe that they're far older. We know that there was a Paleo-American population of people with elongated skulls living here around 12,900 years ago. And it's possible that it was these people who created the rock art. Most of the drawings are anthropomorphic, but a few of them have been interpreted as depictions of varying cultures. A supreme god of the Inca, and according to their mythology, the creator of all things. However, the strangest work of art here is a finger with a very prominent head and enormous eyes reminiscent of the traditional gray alien. Of course, their presence of works of art that look like aliens isn't evidence of the actual existence of aliens. But we have to ask what else the figure might represent. In early 2015, the incredibly well-preserved remains of a mummified monk were found in north-central Mongolia, sitting in a lotus position and still clad in cattle skins. Shortly after the discovery, some of the most senior Buddhists in the country made a shocking claim about the monk. According to them, he isn't dead, he's simply in a very deep meditative trance. We can rule that out based on scientific evidence, although it's more than a little strange that his body is so well preserved. The best guess of experts is that it's all down to the freezing cold Mongolian climate. According to Buddhist belief, there's a rare and deep state of meditation known as tukta. If an individual can remain in the state of tokum for long enough, he can become a Buddha. While this might sound like a fringe belief, the theory was endorsed by the Dalai Lama himself. The monk was only found when somebody tried to sell him on the black market, at which point he was seized and taken to the National Center of Forensic Expertise. Scientists think that he's been posed like this since 1927, but haven't been able to verify his identity. Many ancient sarcophagi have been discovered in Ukraine over the years, but none quite so special as the sarcophagus of Prince Yaroslav the Wise. Part of the reason why he's known as the Wise is that he founded the first ever library in Ukraine inside St. Sophia Cathedral in Kiev, which is where he's now interned. The cathedral itself was built during his reign during the 12th century, and the sarcophagus has been there ever since. But his body is no longer there. It's believed that it was stolen during the Second World War, though nobody knows who stole it, why they'd steal it, or what happened to it afterward. The sarcophagus is one of the few things inside the cathedral that's never been damaged or replaced, as it was attacked and damaged several times during the 13th, 14th, and 15th centuries. By the 17th century, it needed to be almost completely reconstructed, with work beginning in the 1600s and continuing into the 1700s. The sarcophagus remained intact and untouched throughout the world. Today, the cathedral no longer functions as a church and is instead a museum of the religious history of Ukraine. Staying in Ukraine for a moment, a pair of unusual Ophidian sculptures were found close to the city of Terpenes in 2016. The sculptures look like serpent heads and are thought to be the work of a so-called Stone Age snake culture that lived in the region thousands of years ago. When they were found, they were surrounded by ancient animal bones and pieces of flint. Fortunately, there was a fireplace nearby allowing scientists to carry out tests and data discovery somewhere between 10,000 and 309,500 years ago. The people who make the snake heads would have been hunter-gatherers who mostly created things because they had a need for them. So the symbolism of the snake and its importance to the people is something that we can only guess, and we don't have any good guesses, however, not far from here. Or the origin point of the so-called serpent or dragon walls, which snake across Ukraine from Zamir to Panola running for over 600 miles, is that further evidence that the people who lived here worshipped snakes? Are they little more than ancient decorative objects? Now we return to the topic of discoveries so large that we have to ask why nobody noticed them sooner. In this case, it's a large Bronze Age dolmen that was found in the Galilee Hills of Israel. In March 2017, the capstone alone weighs 50 tons, but it's not the size of the dome, making it so interesting. It's what's inside it. The underside of the capstone is covered in intricately carved designs, 15 of them all. This is the first time art has ever been found inside a dome, and in the Middle East. The shapes engraved into the rock have no parallels in the region, and their meaning is unknown. Experts have dated the dolmen to the Middle Bronze Age, which would make it around 4,000 years old. The remains of a further 4 smaller dolmens are dotted around it. A site of this size would require a large workforce who must have been housed, watered, and fed during the construction, which suggests the existence of an organized community. Perhaps even a loosely structured government. The Thule papyrus is an enormously controversial artifact. If we take it at face value, it's supposed to be a transcription of an older ancient Egyptian papyrus dating to the reign of Thutmose III 3,400 years ago. The name of Thule comes from the former Vatican Museum director Alberto Thule, who owned the papyrus and allegedly transcribed it in 1953. His work contains references to circles of fire and fiery disks in the sky, which UFO enthusiasts have claimed is direct evidence that the ancient Egyptians either had contact with or were at least aware of extraterrestrials. There's a big problem here, though. And it's the fact that Thule supposedly completed his transcription based on a single viewing of the original papyrus, and used the form of ancient Egyptian shorthand that he invented himself in order to complete the work. The original papyrus is assumed to have been lost if it ever existed at all. So all we have is Thule's replica of it, and his interpretations. The only reason people believe it to be genuine is a reluctance to accuse a former museum director of the Vatican of being a liar or a fraud. But almost every modern-day Egyptologist considers the papyrus to be a hoax. There are so many ancient monuments and works of art in Peru that some of them get overlooked. Among them are the petroglyphs carved into volcanic rocks, and Arequipa, almost all of which are 1,000 years old. There are about 5,000 volcanic rocks in the region, all of which are leftovers from the eruptions of Chani and Kora, Puna about 50 million years ago. The subject matter of the petroglyphs includes snakes, llamas, parrots, deer, elk, plants, and humans, along with them discs and geometric motifs. They are thought to be the work of the Huari and Chicubamba cultures. Part of the reason that these works of art go unappreciated is that they're very difficult to reach. It takes a lot of hiking and walking to reach this location, but the trip is worth it. Not only are there petroglyphs to look at, but also a stunning desert zone full of ancient volcanoes. It's likely that these ancient people chose the volcanic rocks to etch their artwork onto because they knew that the rocks were somehow special. But it's unlikely they knew why. There's a certain type of ancient discovery that only happens in Denmark. Nowhere else in the world where you find these little clay vessels that the locals like to call face pots. It might be more accurate to call them iPads if there's rarely any facial detail to them other than the eyes, eyebrows, and perhaps a hint of a nose. They're decorated with patterns consistent with Denmark's bunko style, which first began to appear around 5,000 years ago. Some experts believe they're representations of the face of a Stone Age mother goddess, but thus far that's been impossible to prove. They're usually found in and around the sites of passage graves and are therefore presumably connected with burial sites of some kind. No examples of face pots older than known passage graves have been found in Denmark, which implies that they were invented at roughly the same time. So far, examples have been found in Zeno, Maharaj, and Kindle Lows. Historical evidence suggests that when people stopped building passage tombs, they also stopped making face pots. We have no idea why. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.